All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And a couple weeks ago, when we did Victor Crowley and Hatchet, there was a movie that we just kept referencing. And when we finished recording, Dave was like, we've got to do The Burning. We've got to do The Burning. I just kept getting Burning vibes from Hatchet. I'd never seen it. So here we are now. We're going to be doing The Burning. It is April. The weather's warming up. The sleeves are off. Full summer school, summer camp vibe mode here is what we're shooting for. And so released in 81, man, this movie has all the things that we're looking for. So in a section that we're calling Savini School, I mean, what is it about this movie that still makes it click for you almost, 44 years later?
Yeah, I mean, it is dated, I think, in the best possible way that slashers are dated. It feels like a 44-year-old movie.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Again, in a positive way. One of the things that strikes me about this movie, which is something that also strikes me about Sleepaway Camp, when we did Sleepaway Camp all those years ago, is that movies can be more than one thing.
Yeah.
They can be fun, they can be funny, they can be dramatic, they can have all sorts of different moments, and they can also be slow burns while you're enjoying that. And there is so much that's in this movie that kind of today it wouldn't fly. Like, no one would green light this movie today.
Right. Yeah,
And
no, absolutely not.
but when you start thinking, like, this is 1981, this is like just coming off of the height of the giallo in the late 70s, and this is just as the slasher is getting started, right? You got to think 81 is what we often refer to as the year of the slasher.
Right.
This is when all of the stereotypes, the tropes that everyone thinks of, they're being established here, because even though Halloween is 1979, this thing really kicks it off in 1981. So this movie is, for me, the perfect slasher. There's summer camp. There's lots of blood and gore. It's not all the time, but when it happens, boy, does it happen.
Yeah.
It is sexy. It is exciting. It's funny. There are a bunch of familiar faces. And that's one of the things about this movie that I think helps it stand the test of time.
Dude, that blew me away how much I just kept recognizing people and then and just being like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, whether it's Holly Hunter or whether it's my personal favorite of the bunch, Jason Alexander.
Which, look, I was going to save this, but if we're going to talk about him right now, if you're watching us live, I got a little something for you here. We're going to see if I can make this happen. Throw this up here. Look at this fucking hunk.
Yeah.
I mean, George Costanza just absolutely killing it right here in 81.
This is not George Costanza. This man is a bona fide player.
Yes.
All right.
I mean, look at the full head of hair, the chiseled jaw. This guy was it.
Yeah. He really was, and such a likable character too. So it really kind of like plays at odds with the George Costanza that we all think of Jason Alexander as, like maybe the most unlikable television character of all time.
Yeah. But yeah, it was
So,
crazy it was crazy to see all those people, man.
Absolutely crazy to see that. And through this all is Tom Savini's fingerprint.
Yeah.
Which when you talk about horror, you have to stop at the kind of like these tent poles, and Savini is one of them. Savini is one of those guys that you see his name on a movie, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to watch this one. Why? Simply because Savini is attached to it. And this is the height of Savini. 1981. I don't know how he made it. I mean, we all know copious amounts of cocaine.
Right.
1981, right? But man, everything about this movie is exactly what you want it to be. And if you watch this movie and thought, oh, well, that's not what I was expecting, the problem's not the movie. Just keep that in mind. The problem is not the movie. The problem is your expectations. This movie is fucking awesome.
Yeah, this I had zero expectations going into this movie. I had you telling me that we were going to do it, and that that you got the vibes from this from Hatchet. So I wasn't really I knew I was in for a slasher, right? So turn it on, I'm like, all right, summer camp, great start, right? That's always that's gonna hook me right away. That speaks to when we grew up, right? And watching slashers is that summer camp feel. And then you're right. This movie, we talk about movies that stand the test of time because they are, they're still relevant. This is a movie that stands the test of time because it's a time capsule. This movie is exactly 1981. Like if I had not seen when it was made, like as I was firing it up, if you'd have asked me, I'd have been like 82 tops. Like this is absolutely an early 80s slasher.
You can
film.
pinpoint the month in 1981 that this thing was made.
It's there's something about those slashers, those summertime slashers that came out back then that Texas Chainsaw really set the vibe for, in that part of the movie is feeling the oppressiveness of the heat. Like you're watching these movies and you're like, God, man, all of this is happening and they're hot and kind of miserable the whole time. And so you get those feels. You get the Friday the 13th, Camp Blood, Camp Crystal Lake vibes. It ended up, what's fascinating about it is seeing it for the first time this much later, is seeing how, and especially coming off of Hatchet, it would be easy to watch this and be like, oh man, this is really heavily influenced by all this other stuff. But then you see the year, you're like, oh no, like this is just part of that era. This is one of the movies that the others are homaging when they make a Hatchet. Yeah. And so, but it was that type of thing where you could absolutely tell this movie came from the glut of like, all right, there's a great formula here in kids camp, blood and boobs, right? And so, and they just started making those movies, and occasionally you get one with the super crazy twist like your Sleepaway Camp, but this one's really straightforward, and it's better for it. I never at any point expected any sort of like anything crazy to happen. I'm 10 minutes into this movie, I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I'm in for, and I'm about to enjoy it. I loved so much about this. And one of my favorite things about this that absolutely dates when this movie was made is how it just randomly fades out in the middle, like what seems like the middle of a scene. Like somebody will just finish saying something and it's like it's made to go to commercial. Like it's just, they kind of say something and it just fades. And then you're like, oh, okay. That and the constant red stings. Like that is how you 100% place this thing in time. But the random fades that like right at the end of someone's sentence, I found myself laughing every single time.
It's well, okay, so instead of talking in vague terms about this, because we're about to go off on like a 15-minute tangent about how awesome this thing is. All right, let's jump into the story, because you talked about how, you know, there's twists and turns in certain slashers, more giallo-esque, and then, you know, there's those straightaway ones more in the line of this one, right? So we have, in a section we're calling Summer Camp Slashing, the story here is just about the simplest story that you could possibly have for a slasher, and yet I feel like is done so many times. Like it's insane almost how many slashers went back to this same formula. There was a dude, he was weird, he was wronged, now you're fucked, right? That that formula just works and allows us to get to all of the chaos that happens here. So how does the story work for you? Are there any and on top of that, or in addition to that, I don't want to dictate whether it's above or below, you can decide that. In addition to that, are there any other movies that this kind of like you in your brain, like those webs just started spreading, you're like, oh, that's like this, and that's like this, and that's like this, which all of these movies are being made at the same time?
Right. So first off, you're right. The story that's presented to us here immediately, you know, we immediately start off and you're like, okay, here's the guy. Oh, they set him on fire. Oh, he's still alive. Maybe. And then that scene where the doctors are like, just whatever you do, don't go back and hurt them kids. You know, it's just like, okay, yeah, I'm sure he's gonna listen, right? And so, you know, cut to these kids. They're in a summer camp. It's that immediate. Now, I will admit, I never once in my life went to a summer camp. All knowledge I have of summer camp comes from cheesy 80s movies and the show Salute Your Shorts. That's all my camp knowledge. But it felt familiar. Like it felt like this was a camp where I had been before, which immediately kind of, I was like, oh, Camp Blackfoot. Doesn't matter what it's called. I've been here before, right?
Mhm.
I know this place. I know these people. But one of my favorite things about this movie is how long they really teased at it being a slasher while just setting up just kind of, you know, lame kid pranks and the one really weird kid, you know, so they give us that red herring of, well, maybe it's just this one kid who's super weird and doesn't have any friends.
Mhm.
And for 81 minutes, this movie felt like it had so much more in it, which is super refreshing. We talk about that
Yeah.
90-minute mark all the time. So whenever we go to watch a slasher, one of the first notes I always make is, all right, how long is this thing? Because I'm going to write this down. So when it's over, I can say it felt like that, felt like more, felt like less, good way, bad way, whatever. This movie felt like they accomplished so much in 81 minutes. And I think it's because of the really odd pacing that kind of worked in this movie's favor. About halfway through this movie, you're really wondering if this is a slasher or if it's just some sort of weird high tension thriller type thing where you're not really sure what's going on. They open up with the four seam fastball, right? Straight down the
Yeah.
middle. Here's how it's going to be. But then they keep you guessing for a little bit. They make you watch. I really enjoyed that. One of the things that cracks me up whenever we go back and watch a movie that's this old is slang, or just the way that some things age and don't age. Can I point out that there was like a 3-minute chewing out that one guy got where he just kept saying that he should ball the kid out, and that if he told him he would get bawled out by a counselor, and when he was a kid, when he was younger, he did something stupid and a counselor bawled him out, and he just kept saying it. I was like, bud, I need you to quit. I need you to quit. I need you to stop saying that. I even have the captions on. I see that it's spelled BAWL. Don't care. Need you to stop saying that, because apparently very different denotation in 81
Drastically. Yeah.
than what I have come to know that as. And so just the way that people interact is always so funny. And the other thing about going back to one this old is that idea of like, no, these are high school kids. We promise. Look at them. Look at those.
Right.
Look at those high school kids. Just so childlike in their appearance.
Ignore the stubble on that guy, right? And yeah, I promise you that fully grown woman is a freshman in high school. Yeah, it's wild, man.
Yeah. So, but then when we do finally get to the Killing Man, you're like, yeah, this is a Savini film. Like it took it a minute to get here. I was starting to wonder, but man, big ass pruning shears is a solid ass like weapon, because it goes back to the simplicity of making something iconic, right? The Freddy glove is loved because of how weird and unique it is. But how many of these things do we watch where, I mean, you go all the way back to the Prowler, where it's like, that dude just had a pitchfork, and you're just, it makes it feel more visceral that it could just be anybody because they just grabbed something out of the tool shed. I ended up I really enjoyed the way this whole story was presented. You get some characters and some interactions that are problematic, but
Yeah.
it was
one
camp
big
in the
one
80s.
in particular.
Yeah. So I mean, I really, really did enjoy the way this presented. And then, yeah, man, then when they got on a roll, it was a berserker bloodlust chaos run there at the end. That scene on the raft.
Oh boy.
Holy shit, what a scene.
That's the turning point, I think.
Yeah. And my favorite thing about that is the moment I feel like it's in so many films. The one where he's getting stabbed in the throat, so you can tell it's just his head, and then the body, so they stab and you can kind of see it. And it's just like, again, like you said, man, it's Savini's fingerprint. It's Kevin Bacon taking the arrow through the throat. It's all the same stuff, but it's awesome every time. So I'm not upset by it.
And I think that for me, that's one of the things that really sets this movie apart from all of the other slashers, because as prolific as Savini is and as iconic as his work is, we have to remember that there are like a near infinite number of slashers. And 1981 is called the year of the slasher, not because Savini released a handful of slashers that year, but because there were hundreds of slashers released that year, of which Savini worked on a handful. There were so many slashers that had just subpar special effects.
Yeah, I mean, people who don't like look into this the way that we do don't realize that if you had a Super 8, you could just pay a drive-in to let you show your movie. Like, people used to just make movies and then rent the theater so they would get shown. So yeah, hundreds of them getting released, because there would be one that only came out in like Amarillo, Texas, that just some people made, but it got shown on a theater screen.
And that really kind of set it apart, because as this one shows, you don't need much of a story. Now, I do think that there is a progression here, and because there is such a focus on character, you do have a nice character arc that happens for those that survive, at least. And there's a nice reversal of roles here. Like, there's no final girl, it's a final guy,
right?
Like, there's a lot of really interesting things that happen narratively in this movie. But ultimately, what sets slashers apart is how good is your killer and how good are the kills.
Yeah,
that's kind of it, really. Your cast helps. The story helps, obviously, but that's it. That's what it boils down to. And this story allows Tom Savini to be Tom Savini. And he's Tom Savini not at the beginning of his career. This is him in the middle of his career. He has, at this point, perfected a lot of effects and is experimenting with how to do certain things better and how to and always pushing the envelope. Um the finger slicing is one of those that for
Ugh.
me kind of really sets this thing apart, because I'm trying to think how many times we saw that before 1981.
Right.
And I don't know that we did, because oftentimes it would just look like a couple of sausages getting sliced off of a like a ground chuck hand.
Right.
And this time it looked real. It looked real. And then there's certain things that happen here, like the story propels us to these moments. And instead of it being the way that some movies are, like we've talked about how, for example, Terrifier is a movie where the story isn't really very important. It just gets us to the next instance of violence and allows us to kind of go along with Art on his tirade, right? This is different because it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of mounting tension.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of blue balls too, because there's a lot of, okay, something's going to happen. And then nothing happens. It's like, oh, okay, so I'll just sit back now. And then something's going to happen, and then nothing happens. That makes the payoff when it does happen so much better. I mean, I've never practiced tantric sex before, but I have to imagine that it's something like this, where it's like, hey, I promise that it's gonna be big. It's gonna be good. And that's what this is. When that raft scene happens, wow, that is everything that you've been waiting for, and it's like halfway through the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while to get there.
It does take a while to get there. And the other thing that, like you said, you've never gone to a sleepaway camp. I've never gone to a sleepaway camp, but I did go camping quite often with my parents. I don't know if this is anything you ever did, like just going out.
I mean, I've gone out camping before, not with my parents, but when I was older, like when I used to rock climb, we would camp to stay at places. Yeah.
So same thing. You know that feeling of some shit just went wrong. Why?
Right.
Because I know I didn't fuck something up here. So something like, why are all the canoes gone?
Yeah.
Little things like that make it noises that you hear out in the wilderness that make you think, am I alone? That's the sort of thing that the story really does for this movie, is it allows that tension to mount, and it allows us to, once there is that payoff, to really kind of feel it. And this movie is made in a visually very similar way as those 1970s Giallo movies are. Your Mario Bavas and your Lucio Fulcis and your Dario Argentos. This takes a lot from those guys.
Yeah.
Visually. Something like this image that we have here in the back holding the shears. That is classic Giallo. This movie has so much style. Maybe not so much in the substance, but
yeah,
I think that it's okay for you to be something and you make zero attempt to be anything other than that. I kind of like that. I kind of dig that. Like when a band really knows, like an AC/DC, ZZ Top,
all
these
those
guys
bands that you
really
don't know which song it is until the words start, because the intros are all strikingly similar.
And yeah, man. And do you care? No.
Nope.
No, it could be Back in Black, it could be Hell's Bells, it could be Highway to Hell, it could be Whole Lotta Rosie, doesn't matter. Because I'm gonna bang my head here and we're gonna have a great time. And that's exactly what this is. It's like, hey, you came for blood, we got the blood. You came for boobs, we got the boobs. You came for nothing more than blood and boobs, you're going to get a lot of blood and boobs. And you're going to laugh along the way because you got to laugh. To me, this is the makings of a perfect slasher. I think there's a reason why so many movies came back to this and why you often see this, even though I don't think that this is one that people talk about as much. Everyone talks about Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I'd never even heard of this one until you referenced it last week.
If you start reading about slashers, if you start going into horror groups, this is one that pops up time and time again. And it's usually that one dude, the old guy, the gray beard in there, right? Who's like, well, listen, if you like that one, let me teach you something here. You got to watch The Burning. And then you start looking it up. And it's like Tom Savini and fucking George Costanza. Sign me the fuck up.
Yeah, and you're referencing the giallos and stuff like that. And I talked about it at the top, how funny it is, just the red stings. But you're right. There's a style to that where they obviously had influence in what they were trying to kind of bring into their movie. Those red stings that happen that just fill the screen, and then when they come back, you're on to something else. That felt like one of those more artsy movies, and it was a way to, which is a really weird thing to say about this particular movie, but there were things like that gave it this really kind of weird art house feel at times, which is cool. Cause like you said, a movie can be more than one thing, right? You don't have to commit to just being another Friday the 13th or Sleepaway Camp, right? Show people that you like this other stuff, make them realize that it's like something else, because it's super easy to draw the comparisons to all the other ones that happen at summer camp. But to then have to look at it and be like, oh, well, it's also kind of like this, right? And I remember, bizarrely enough, I remember something like that in To Kill a Duckling, or just whatever. And you start to get these weird feelings of this movie being more than just one of the 100 slashers that were released in 1981. When you're talking about some of the kills, one of the things about this movie, and I had mentioned the pruning shears, is the way that it's not just about the way they kill people. It's about how smart he was with the shears too. Like when he pins the dude to the tree with them by just putting him over his arm. It's one thing to watch someone get killed by getting stabbed in the throat, and you watch like, oh God, that sucks, but at least he's dead and he doesn't have to suffer through it. Anybody who's ever just like cut their arm or can imagine being pinned to something where every time you move, it's just slicing more and more. That one got me, man. Like as far as just like this guttural pain that you're having watching it, that is one that you can imagine, right? Like I can't physically kind of put it in my head what it must feel like to get stabbed in the throat, but I've cut my arm before. And to the idea of just it's slowly happening every time I move. Oh, that one made me cringe.
The forehead slice.
Yeah.
What happens in that same scene as the neck stab. That's another one where it's like, we've all given ourselves paper cuts in weird places, on a cheek, your forehead. Motherfucker comes in and slices you with pruning shears, and you see the skin just split open. You're like, oh my God, you actually cut someone, didn't you? You sick bastard.
Yeah.
Savini is the only one who can sell these effects. I don't know if you can tell, but right here, I got an ouchie earlier today. I was doing dishes, and there was a steak knife that cut my fingy. It hurt. It hurt bad. I can't fucking imagine what it would feel like. I can, but it's only in my imagination that I can imagine what it's like to lose all four fingers in one go.
Right.
This movie is mean. And
Yeah.
that's something that I really like about this in that Terrifier Art the Clown way. This movie is totally about revenge, and Cropsey doesn't care who it is that he's hurting. Like, you're a kid, you represent those kids that burned me.
Yes.
That is outstanding. Of course, by the time the end comes, we do get a little bit of that. I wouldn't call it a twist ending, but the full picture is revealed, and it's like, oh my god, the counselor was the kid. What?
Oh,
This is why he's
no.
going. This is why he's going after them. I love that. Is it forced? Maybe. Do I care? Absolutely not.
Right.
No, I don't. I wanted that final showdown. I love the fact that that final showdown doesn't take place in a summer camp. I love that it didn't take place in the woods. Why is there this factory with like a system of caves?
Like a mine shaft.
I don't know. I can't explain it. I've never lived in the Northeast. I'm assuming that there are places like this. I mean, I don't know. I saw Rambo First Blood, and there were fucking caves right next to a town. So maybe I don't know. But I can tell you that I am so grateful that this movie changes scenery as often as it does. This is something that I don't think it's given as much credit for. We often get the summer camp, and the summer camp can give us a bunch of different scenes that we can play with. Like there's the bunks, and there's the kitchen, and there's like the archery course. Like there's a lot of different places where we can go, but we go fucking everywhere. We go totally off the summer camp. We're on the lake, or the river, whatever the fuck that is, right? And then we're in the woods, and then we're in a fucking mine. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, and also just the upgrade from pruning shears to flamethrower.
Ooh,
that just kind of, it's like, oh yeah, no, but because on the one hand it's like, wait, what? But on the other hand, it's like, makes total sense because they burned him, and he knows who this kid is. So fuck this kid. You want to know? Like, you're gonna learn today.
Yeah.
Like there was just such a drastic jump in the way that everything went by the end of this movie that made it must watch, right? This wasn't, we talk about all the time, does a movie keep me from picking up my phone? The only time I did was when I was like, wait a second, is that Holly Hunter? It was the one time when I picked up my phone, because it was like, I think that's Miss Incredible. And so I had to grab the phone and check. Other than that, it was just, I didn't look away. And we talked about it. You're always going to be faced with these things that are problematic. That were the types of things that got put into these movies. Like, yes, the dude does throw a fit and tell off the girl because she changes her mind about having sex in the lake or the creek. They called it Devil's Creek, right? And then so he throws a little hissy fit about it. But on the plus side, that's where it ended. He at least just called her names and threw a hissy fit.
Right.
That could have been way more problematic, other than him just being a dickhead about it. So, you know what? Honestly, I'll take it. Like that's
not too bad in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, exactly. That's real low tier problematic stuff to happen in a movie that is this old, where just some of the stuff that we could go on and on about being problematic was running rampant in these movies. Like, that was one where it's just like, all right, this guy's a dick. He's probably going to get what's coming to him. We're going to be all right. And so, but then again, like I said, you watch this movie and you don't wonder when it was made. You know exactly when this thing was made. And I love it for that.
Well, and one of the other things that I love, which we've been talking about, and I feel like we can keep going on about this. I didn't expect us to talk this long about the story, is the cast. So in an effort to try to keep things moving, in a section we're calling teens, and more teens, Jeff, or not Jeff, Daniel, Jeff, what the fuck?
That is a first. That is an absolute first in years of this.
Jeff hasn't been on this show since we did
Demon Night?
Demon Night. Yes, Jeff hasn't been on
that
since
was like
we
my
did
second
Demon
or
Night.
third episode.
Wow. You know, Jeff and I were texting earlier today, and I was trying to like close out some things on my phone while I was talking, and Jeff's name popped up.
We do both have Italian last names. I'll give you that.
So Jeffrey,
please, Geoffrey.
So Geoffrey, is there a cast member that immediately jumps out at you?
Oh, I talked about Jason Alexander earlier, but I know how much you loved him, so I'm going to leave him up there for you because my favorite cast member here, and the one who, as soon as I saw his face, regardless of it being 40 years ago, recognized, loved him. Fisher Stevens.
Can I call it? Oh, I was going to call it. Yes, I knew it.
Fisher Stevens as Woodstock in this movie was so great. Fisher Stevens is just one of those guys, man. He always carries himself the exact same way. He kind of just he melts into just slight variations of who I can only assume Fisher Stevens actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that everything went down for Woodstock, just like the lanky, nerdy, funny guy who's fallen in with, you know, some of the guys who are popular because they're super charismatic. And he's etched his way into this group as being the funny one. I love that. I loved that for him. He was hilarious. I love when he got his moment where he had to go find his meds. And so, you know, he's walking, he's in the bunk at night and leaving the lights off and gets scared by the counselor guy. But it was just, he was a nice little, whereas, you know, your Jason Alexander was kind of a serious type of comedic relief. He was very cartoonish in what we got out of Fisher Stevens. I thought he did a great job. Plus, man, he's the one who got to get his fingers cut off in that just epic scene. And the way that he just kind of reacts to them getting cut off was so good. Combination of the special effects and his acting, you really did wonder for a second if Tom Savini might have cut off one of his fingers. And so I loved him in this. I loved that he didn't really, he was like one of the ones who wasn't really sex crazed. You know, he was just kind of there to have a good time with his buddies in summer camp. And I kind of dug that role for him.
And you're right, man. A special effect goes a long way, but you need to sell it. If you're not selling that special effect, the effect itself is lost. And his face when he sees it, and you think about it, and it's not like a natural way that he's holding his hand out. Like,
right.
This is clearly very staged, very posed. Like, this is a very well-directed moment that's happening here. And the way that he continues to hold his hand out for the camera so that he can then be in the background, like, it is amazing. It's absolutely amazing the way that he does that. Once he finally gets the neck sliced and ripped open, it's an amazing death. He does such a good job. And he does, like you say, he does a really good job of portraying innocence because he seems youthful there. And part of it is his face, because even as an older guy, he still has a youthful face. So part of it is his face, but he does channel a sense of innocence and mischief without seeming like a dirtbag.
Right.
Because it's very easy for a guy like Glazer to look like a dirtbag. There's something about his look, right? He's well casted, right? And of course he's acting. I'm sure that he's not a dirtbag in real life, but he's got that look about him. And Fisher Stevens does a really stellar job at being the nice kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's exactly like Joel David Moore was back in Hatchet. I mean, it's that same
Yes.
thing, just 40 years apart or 30 years.
Yeah, precisely. Okay, so I am going to talk about Jason Alexander. Jason Alexander is an actor who, for me, has just about always been in my life, right? So Seinfeld starts in 1989. I'm born in 1987. And by the time I'm old enough to be aware of television, it's a phenomenon.
Right.
So I have been watching him my entire life. I have always been a fan of Seinfeld, even before I understood the jokes. I just was really drawn to those characters and the way that they portrayed these caricatures, because they're not real characters,
Right.
Jason Alexander was always that guy for me. And although he's been in quite a few movies and TV shows, for me, Jason Alexander exists in exactly two things: Seinfeld and The Burning.
Right.
And when I see him in The Burning, it's always like watching him appear for the first time again, because I see him and like, yes, I do have memory issues, but also I see him and I'm like, fuck, he's Dave. And that is like, there's a reconnection with him and the character of Dave. Of course, I am also Dave, right? So there's all of this that's happening, and I think that his character is, I mean, realistically, we all want to be calm, cool, collected. We don't think of ourselves as Dave, right? We think of
We all want to be
ourselves
Todd.
as Todd, right? That said, I'm a little bit more realistic. I know that I'm Dave. I'm gonna shoot my shot, and law of averages, I'm gonna hit.
It's a numbers game. It's a numbers game.
It is a total numbers game. You know, you've seen my wife. I can't land her, but it's a numbers game, right? So I am Dave. I am Dave. And I love the way that he's just always hot to go.
Yeah.
HOTTOGO. He is hot to go. Whatever it is, he's down for it. And in a lot of ways, I see myself reflected in that, because I have my own ideas about what the fuck I want to do, but I don't care enough about any of them to be like, nah, that's what we got to do. It's like, hey, we're gonna go to a barbecue joint. I'm like, all right, I don't eat fish, or I only eat fish, right? I guess I'll have the catfish,
Right.
that sort of thing. Like, hey, we're gonna go cow tipping. Like, well, you know, I'll give me pom poms and I'll cheer you on, like that sort of thing. So I love his character. His celebration of life in this movie, I think, is something that is both funny and beautiful. And throughout the entire time, he manages to feel like an actual human being. Like, this is
Yes.
something that his work as George Costanza doesn't do. He feels like a cartoon character. He feels like a real person in this movie. Someone who's like, oh no, that's a guy. This is a documentary. This movie. This is a documentary, and that's a real guy right there.
Yeah, I love the way that he's, look, what you're talking about, you see yourself. I see myself in Dave as well, right? Because one thing about me, I'm gonna make my little jokey joke. You know, like no matter what's happening, I'm gonna cut a joke. That's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, gonna shoot my shot. Like that's what I'm gonna do. And I also love the way that he kind of I was talking about Fisher Stevens kind of making his way into this group of the popular guys by being the goofy one. He made himself indispensable. He's like the Morgan Freeman from Shawshank in this, right? He seems to be the guy who can get you what you need. Like he just shows up with the bag and with Glazer's, throwing a shit fit because he got him unlubed condoms or whatever. But he seems to be the guy. It's like, oh, if you need something, you go to Dave, right? And he made himself indispensable. What's also great is for as much as he was, like you said, shooting his shot and hitting on these girls and at times being crude about it, because of the way that the things he was saying might have been crude, but the way he was always presenting himself, he was so natural with it that it did always come off as funny. It always came off as him just genuinely, hey, I like you. I'm going to make my joke. It's going to be dirty. You're going to laugh. It's all good. Once you got him laughing, man, that's foot in the door. It's foot in the door. You got to make him laugh. That's how you get it started. And he got that. And so, like I said, I was racking my brain to try to think of something other than George Costanza as I'm watching him, because that's like my one frame of reference. The problem is that for so many people, Seinfeld was such a phenomenon that was what I learned them as. And then their entire post-career just became about being that person from Seinfeld. You got a couple who moved, Julia Louis-Dreyfus went on and did Veep and kind of, but Jason Alexander never really kind of reinvented himself. His career post Seinfeld is really just about whether or not we can squeeze George Costanza into something here and there. And so it was really cool to go back and see him looking like a hunky Fred Savage. He
it's a good way of it's a fantastic assessment there.
Thank you. He did a really good job here. I really enjoyed him. Speaking of people that I knew from other things, Leah Aries in this. Look, as soon as I didn't even know her name, right? She shows up and I was like, oh my God, it's the girl from Bloodsport. Went and looked. Yeah. She's maybe done other stuff. I don't know. But I was like, maybe. And that was maybe, but that's she's what was her name? Janice or something like that in Bloodsport. That's what I know her as. But one, aside from being just smoking hot, she was incredible in this. She did a really good job of serving as as a voice of reason to a lot of what was going on, and didn't completely sell out on that hysterical female role. I did really enjoy the fact that while there were moments where she was freaking out and Todd had to kind of calm her down, she did really step into this role of knowing that she was responsible for all of these other people. And there was a really delicate balance in there with what she did between freaking out and trying to keep everybody together, deciding what the right thing to do for everybody was. And she did a really good job, even though she looked like she was the exact same age as every other person in this film. There was no doubt in my mind that she was the older one because of the way that she carried herself through this movie.
Yeah, I mean, she is an authority figure here. Because when you look so similar in age to everyone, there has to be something that distinguishes you from everyone else. And I'm not sure if it's how she carried herself, how she spoke, if it was a confidence thing, but there is something there, something that marks her as the adult in the room.
Right.
When all of these other kids are really just adults themselves. So I love that. And then there's the fact that she and Todd are basically running the high school part of this camp. Like, it's just them two.
Yeah.
And all of these other teens, very much near adulthood, like any one of them could have taken them on. And yet here she is running her side of the camp deftly. Like, there is never a question as to who's in charge there. And then, of course, She is stunning. I mean,
Yeah.
legs for days.
Oh man, just killing it in a one piece. Just
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't know when it happened, when women felt like the only way to be sexy is, and of course this is not all women. I don't want to paint with, a broad brush here, but the there isn't just one way to be sexy. You don't need the skimpiest bikini possible. That one piece,
Yeah.
that did it for me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you on that one. It's a sign of maturity.
I like to think so. I like to think that it is.
You know what it honest to God probably boils down to is as we get older and we're looking at older women, that's just like that's where the style goes. And so the type of woman that we're looking at starts to wear that type of bathing suit, and then we just start to appreciate that type of bathing suit.
I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. But also Baywatch, they all wore one pieces.
Good call.
Like I think that there was a time when that was the standard. And not to say that bikinis didn't exist before them, because they obviously did, but I don't know. There's something there. I would like, and I realize it's going to be difficult now with all the cuts in funding and everything that's going on, but I would like some D1 research school. I am a graduate of Boston College. I would love if Boston College could fund some sort of research on the bathing suit.
The bathing suit.
Just the bathing suit, because even for men, right? When did we go from that one-piece jumper to the board short, right? I mean, you can track it through time, but why? That's everyone asks.
I'm big on the 4-inch inseam bathing suit now.
Oh, I'm a 3-incher.
Oh, yes, sir. Okay.
Yeah, I like to sometimes make the chillin' run.
Yeah, man. Put those thighs on them.
Oh yeah. Anyway, I have to talk about Brian Matthews as Todd. He really does, and kind of like the counterbalance to Leah Aries is Michelle. He is really the anchor that makes everything in this movie work, because without his character, of course, you could do this with any Joe Schmo in the role, but without his character, you don't have that through line that takes us from that opening scene where everything goes south to the closing scene where it all starts to make sense.
Right.
But on top of that, you have to have someone who can be both caring and firm, someone who could kick everyone's ass and yet hold you and allow you to cry in his very firm male bosom, right? So he does that so well, because he strikes me a lot actually as a teacher, because from everyone from Alfred to Glazer, he knows exactly how to treat this person to get what he needs out of them, which in the end is how to teach them to get what they need out of themselves. That's like an Obi-Wan Kenobi level Jedi master right there. All right. I love the way that he handles himself in every single situation. These situations are written. He has to handle himself that way. But I don't have to buy it. I don't have to believe it. And I do with him. He's got a way of just making you feel like this is him. I mentioned like the documentary angle, right? This occasionally feels like I'm just a voyeur they're watching all of this kind of unfold as these events are happening in real time. And I think he does a really, really great job of that, whether it's reassuring Michelle, whether it's calming down Alfred, whether it's giving Eddie the business and telling him like, yo, you're a piece of shit,
Right.
whether it's giving Glazer the tough love that he needs to get off of his bullshit. This is a character that we all have Todds in our life, and we put those faces of whoever that Todd is for us in that position, but he channels that so well.
Yeah, I mean, Todd, he comes across as the dad who's going to make sure everybody keeps rowing, right? In a lifeboat situation, you need a Dave to kind of distract people from how dire the situation is, but every bit as important is the Todd who's keeping it moving forward. Yes, it seems like all is lost, but if we stop, then there's no hope of being rescued. And so we get him as the one who keeps everybody moving forward. He knows what's going on. One thing that was really great about the Todd character here is the way that there was an acceptance of responsibility for what happened. A lot of times when we get these revenge style slasher films, the people who may have been involved try to wash their hands of what of what they did and why this is coming back. There was a certain level of accountability that Todd held himself to in understanding that he created this. He was part of creating the situation. He didn't do it on his own. And I think that really set him apart from a lot of these people. Like you take your Nightmare on Elm Street, the parents of these kids who
never take responsibility.
It's like, okay, yes, he was a pedophile, but you also just burned a man alive. Like, so
due process is important.
Right, exactly. So, but they never want to acknowledge that. In their minds, they did exactly what was right, and that they are now being punished for nothing. That wasn't like that with Todd. There was remorse in his voice when he was telling people, and you get the realization that he was the kid who set Cropsey on fire in that summer camp. And that was a big deal. It like you said, it felt real. It felt like a very human thing to have emotions about the fact that you did something awful to someone, especially in this situation where, to the best of our knowledge, this dude was just kind of a weird groundskeeper.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't actually do anything wrong to anybody. And it was a prank that had gone too far, but he never just kind of chalked it up to that. Like, oh, it was supposed to just be a prank. We don't deserve this. He was like, man, I suck. I set this innocent dude on fire, and I'm so sorry, y'all. Like, we're going to get through this, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe. But this is my fault. And that was a really interesting moment in that. And so, and I mean, as we get towards the end of characters here, we've got to get into the section where, I mean, let's talk about that guy he set on fire. Let's talk about the man in the background here wielding the pruning shears. This is Cropsey, a name that is not unique to this movie. The legend of Cropsey goes far beyond The Burning. It is a New England urban legend outside of the summer camp that we're given here. So they just kind of pulled this one out of a hat. But what do you think about this version of Cropsey that was presented to us in The Burning?
I love this version of Cropsey. And something that I mentioned in the Hatchet episode that we did a couple weeks ago is that there were actually 2 Cropsey movies in development at the same time. They did not know that this was going on, which caused the other movie to change its name and change the name of its killer, but it is in effect Cropsey, which is the movie Madman. And the campfire story is such a timeless and powerful bit of narrative, because I don't know how young you were when you started going out camping with your friends, but I I kind of feel like campfire stories, particularly if you're younger, leave such lasting impressions on you. And I have had the good fortune of being able to camp all around North America and sit around campfires in quite literally all but two of the contiguous 48 states.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And I thank my parents often for the trips that we took, and they were always camping trips. And being able to sit around campfires around all the different corners of this continent and be able to listen to what the campfire stories are, who the villains of these stories are, why they're the villains of these stories. That I think was so beneficial to me because it gave me a healthy fear of the wilderness.
Right.
It gave me a healthy fear of people. It gave me a healthy fear of society, because very often society is the problem in these campfire stories. When you stop and think about it, like, what made Cropsey Cropsey? Well, it's the kids that come from the city to these summer camps. They're the ones who really created Cropsey. I love that aspect of Cropsey's backstory, particularly the way it's done in this movie. And I love that it starts with that and ends with that. It ends around a campfire too. And that campfire looks the same but different from the campfire that we got in the middle of this movie when Todd is telling the story. I found that to be such an amazing bit of storytelling here. There's so much potential for more Cropsey. It's kind of insane to me that we never got a sequel to this.
Yeah.
That we never got Cropsey 2, or the Burning 2, Electric Boogaloo, or whatever, like there should have been more Cropsey. And I don't know why we didn't get more. I think the movie made money from what I remember reading. I mean, it wasn't a total flop.
Right.
And even if you broke even back in those days, that was like, hey, get ready, we're doing a second one. But for me, the brutality with which Cropsey approaches everyone, it's dispassionate. It's very giallo the way that he does it. There's so much malintent there. Sometimes I feel like Jason can kill someone just because they're there.
Right.
You're in my way, sort of thing. This is so filled with intent. Like, I want to kill you. You are the one that I am going for right now. And you're taking all of my passion in this matter. It's scary, actually, when you stop and you think about the level of violence that's rained down on someone, an innocent person who has nothing to do with what happened to him. It's like Art the Clown level violence that we see in
Yeah.
a lot of this, and the only thing that stops it from being as gory, I think, is money.
Yeah.
If there had been more money that could have been thrown at this, it would have been bigger, and it would have been more over the top, because as it stands, the violence is really realistic. There's not an abundance of blood or gore. It's just the right amount, or at least what I would imagine is the right amount. And I think that's part of what makes Cropsey so scary for me. It's like, this is a real dude who could exist in my world. And if he decided to deal violence to me, it would look an awful lot like this.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the violent intent that he has. I mean, it's summed up perfectly in what leads to that raft scene where
Mhm.
he is laying low in their canoe, waiting for them to get close enough for him to just absolutely destroy them all. And they, they're rowing up to it thinking, oh, great, we can get off this piece of shit raft that we built. We'll get in the canoe. We're going to go get help. And he just lays the most simplistic trap ever that then just plays out horrifically for these
Mhm.
teenagers. And then puts their bodies back on the raft and sends it back as a
Yes.
fucking message. Like,
Diabolical.
hey, this is what's coming for you. It me, and I'm pissed. Plus a Cropsy as just a person. Whenever you watch a slasher, there's always that moment where you're trying to figure out if they are just kind of abnormally strong or supernaturally strong.
Mhm.
We never really got anything out of him that said supernaturally strong. But to anyone who's ever tried to stand up in a fucking canoe, he's got superhuman balance. Jesus. I've tried to stand up in a canoe just to take a whiz before and almost fallen out. He murdered like 6 teenagers while standing in a canoe. it's impressive.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's hyper violent in what he's doing. And it's for like the complete opposite reason that Art the Clown is, while being similar, right? Art thinks it's funny. It's violence for violence sake. This is a guy who he wants revenge, but he's not fucking around with you like a Freddy Krueger. He wants revenge, and he wants it to be swift and brutal. He doesn't want to mess with you. He just wants you gone. Why? Because you're a camper, and campers set him on fire.
Mm-hmm.
There's a terrifying primordial level to the way that Cropsy views violence and revenge. Like, it's Old Testament blood for blood revenge that Cropsy is out for. And it's really fucking scary. Like, I'm so happy to now know this movie and this guy, because now I can become the guy who's like, oh yeah, no, it's great, but have you seen The Burning? Like, I'm so like, yeah, no, Jason's great. Do you know about Cropsy? Like, I'm so excited to be able to be that guy now, because he really does in one movie just firmly plant himself in that short list. You're obviously always going to end up with the same 4 or 5 at the top. But when you get into, what used to be the honorable mention section of Geekmore, right? Like, this is where he's in the argument now. It depends on how many of those you're going to get, because even in one movie, this guy deserves to be remembered. And I was super impressed with how he pulled that off, all without ever really seeing his face too much. It was.
But that's a big part of it too, and something that Savini, I think, with how amazing his kill effects are, he sometimes, I think, gets overlooked for his creature effects. And that design of Cropsy as like this melted, burnt shell of a man, that's scary in itself. And I don't know that the intent of the movie is honorable, right? Because we don't want to look at someone who has a deformity and say, well, that's a monster. That's not a positive message. But he's not a monster because of his deformity. He's a
Right.
monster because he allows hate to consume himself. So that effect of making him as ugly on the outside as he is on the inside is fantastic. It's wonderful. And it's what I think makes, on top of all the other stuff, it's like the cherry on top of the sundae of why Cropsy is such a fan favorite. Why you hear The Burning pop up every so often when you're talking to die-hard horror fans. It is a cult classic. It's not a bona fide classic. This is not going to hold up in conversation the same way that your Friday the 13th or I think even something like the Prowler comes up in
Right.
conversation more than this one does. And in a lot of ways, this is a much more traditional slasher than the Prowler ever could be.
Yeah.
And yet also bucks tradition more than the Prowler does.
Yeah, it did a lot of those things very well. So let's decide how well it did some of those things, as it is now time to rate this movie. So if you need a quick refresher, we never rate a movie against other movies. Sure, we've talked about a lot of them, but we're just looking at what The Burning presented to us. So in order to do that effectively, we create a unique rating system for every single movie that we rate, so we are not comparing it to others. So Dave, out of a possible 5 bloody finger stumps, what do
Ooh,
you
love it.
give The Burning?
There are 4 bloody finger stumps in this movie.
Yes.
There has to be at least 4, therefore, because otherwise that just makes me a liar. And you can look to anything in this movie and find another bloody finger stump. This is slasher perfection, I think. Is it a slow burn? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? No. Is it funny? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? No. Is it mean and brutal? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? No. Every question you ask about this movie, the answer is yes. And the follow-up question of, is that bad? The answer is always no. There is nothing about this movie that I would change. And does it take a minute for it to get started and the killing to get going? Yeah, but I wouldn't change that either. And in the end, what keeps me coming back to this movie is the same thing that keeps me coming back to all of the slashers that I come back to. It is a fun watch. It's an absolutely fun watch. There's actors that I love to see on screen, whether it's because they're commanding or they're funny or they're beautiful or whatever the reason. I want to see them on my screen. And then their deaths are so worth it. This is exactly the reason why the slasher became what it was, because people wanted to keep going back to the movies and see them. I think we need more movies like this. We don't get enough like this anymore. I love elevated horror. I've said before that my favorite horror movie is Hereditary, but we need more movies like this. Just fun.
Yeah.
And this is why.
Yeah, look, I can't add too much more to that. This movie absolutely is 5 bloody finger stumps. It's everything I'm looking for in one. It's that setting where you're away from everything, so you feel stranded, you feel trapped, help isn't coming. It's all of the things that make a movie scary, that make it fun to watch. It does so many things so well. Like I said, I'm glad to have this one in the movies that I know about now. And it's 5 bloody finger stumps, man.
There you go. So this is an absolutely perfect 5 bloody finger stumps for The Burning. So I want to thank everyone who stuck with us for this episode. I loved that we kind of went into the modern era first and then kind of went back into the past and said, well, let's see where this goes. Thank you for trusting me on this ride, because I know what it's like to be like, yeah, I've never heard of this fucking movie before. What are you talking about, man?
So make sure you head over to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social media outlets. We, of course, are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all of those things at ShiverPod. You can catch us live on Wednesdays when we're doing it. And we know our schedule's been weird. If you listen all the time, Dave and I are teachers. Things pop up. But we've got some great plans for some things that are coming out. So make sure you head to all of those to keep an eye on exactly what we will be doing in the future, because we've got some good ones planned out. So we can't wait to hear from you.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.